technology companies and public authorities that are funded by the European Commission under the Horizon 2020 programme to explore the key characteristics of fairness and inclusivity for women employed across the transport sector. The project team consists of 14 partners, including research organisations and transport services. The project is using 4 real-world scenarios, use cases, where fairness and inclusiveness for women is a current central issue. But today, however, we will only be discussing the employment roles. The main aim of the data collected for the Diamond Project was to identify barriers faced by women employed in transport and to identify the facilitators supporting women employed in transport. In order to achieve this, we collected qualitative data, face-to-face interviews, focus groups. We had online satisfaction surveys, and we conducted scoping reviews of wider academic literature and policy documents. Our sample included speaking to women who were frontline workers, train drivers, coach drivers, women who've been employed as engineers, HR staff, frontline managers. And what we're looking for now is industry input to what our findings. So briefly, the high-level findings that we have found identified unfairness through actual behaviour, e.g. in time travel to work, as a longer time may reflect fewer job opportunities in general. Perceptions, security, fears, although these may or may not reflect actual risks. Perceptions, feelings of discrimination. So what we did is we lifted these up to high level, and we have 3 main themes that we will be looking at. The capacity to meet the required needs in the role, as in appropriate training, flexible working, culture, discrimination, accessibility to these roles for women, about recruitment, careers, career development, promotion and facilities, and safety and security for women employed. So we have a wonderful group of experienced speakers today who will discuss their research, their experiences of being a woman working on the front line in rail, senior women in transport, and we also have the results of 2 other surveys conducted focusing on women employed across the transport sector. But before we hear from these speakers, I would like to introduce you to Christina Marolda, who for almost 30 years was a policy officer at the European Commission in charge of research and innovation in the transport system, with a focus on research and policy mainstreaming to reach a proper gender balance in mobility. Christina? You're on mute.
So I start again. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for inviting me here. Yes, I was more or less in the background of the call of proposals for which this project, out of which this project was retained and funded. And I'm very happy to see how it is going on and proceed. Now I just wanted to highlight, I retired from the European Commission, so I'm no longer responsible in any way of what's going on with this project. But I mean, I just wanted to inform you and to let you understand why the Commission was so keen to foster and support employment of women in the transport sector. This call, I mean, was also stimulated by Commissioner Violeta Bulc, Commissioner at the time of the call, which was extremely engaged in reaching a better balance of workers in the transport sector. But why? I mean, we do not see masses of women knocking at the door of transport employers to have a job. So that is not a question of not having the possibility of engaging them. We don't even have the demand, maybe. But why? We will never know that until we do not to understand which are the mental and physical barriers for transport workers. So we have to knock down these barriers in order to allow women to be there. But why? Because transport, in fact, or mobility, is not an activity per se, but is a fundamental enabler for other fundamental rights like education, work, health, leisure, culture, and everything. So that is why transport must be inclusive and fair for everybody. And the presence of women as workers and possibly as decision makers is therefore the only guarantee that women's rights are needed and considered and met. I think that today we have this example of rail transport. I remember, and please correct me if it is no longer true, that rail was the sector of transport with the lowest percentage of women workers. And I must say that also women's rights and needs and requirements as passengers are never being considered. In rail sector, there is a high consideration of other vulnerable groups like disabled, elderly, whatever, but women needs have never been directly considered and exclusively considered. Going from security at the stations, at the boarding places, and comfort on board. I never saw a train, for example, with a little place for changing babies. Where you have it on planes, you have it on boats, you have it even on the highways, everywhere. So I think it is extremely important to link also this lack of consideration of women's needs and the lack of sufficient number of women workers in this sector. So I really welcome this exercise in the Diamond Project, and I'm really longing to listen to the other speakers that are coming now. Thank you very much for that, for this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina. Thank you for that. So our first speaker up is Wushang from the International Transport Forum, who will be discussing the gender dimension of transport.
Yes. Hello, everyone. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you so much for this opportunity for the ITF, the International Transport Forum, to participate in this important webinar. And for those who are unfamiliar with the ITF, we are an intergovernmental organization. We are based in Paris at the OECD, but we are politically autonomous, which means we have a lot more member countries than the OECD. We currently have 62 member countries with a wide ranging of needs and priorities. And gender is, in fact, one of the key priorities recognized by many of our member countries, as well as our Secretary General. And so today I will be focusing on one of our latest publications on the gender dimension of the transport workforce. And so at the ITF,
Wait, you've been on mute. Can you unmute yourself?
Yes, sorry. So at the ITF, our work on gender is on both women as transport users and women as transport workers. And we do believe that both areas are interconnected, as an increase in gender equality in the transport workforce will ultimately lead to more inclusive transport infrastructure and services for all users. And we also know that transport has been a male-dominated sector since its inception. where women only make up 17% of its workforce in 2018 globally. And despite the benefits of a more diverse workforce, which has shown to increase welfare gains for both women and men, productivity, business, economic growth, and poverty reduction, there are still barriers that limit women to enter and stay in the workforce. And so in our study, we have found that such challenges and barriers mostly fall under the categories of working conditions, which also include the number of working hours, the time of work, the place of work, as well as gender stereotyping. But at the same time, we know that the transport workforce is evolving. And so the traditional perception that transport-related jobs require physical strength is also increasingly less relevant as technology advances and digital innovations are now applied throughout the sector. Hence, the objective of our study is really focused on understanding the types of barriers that exist in preventing gender equality in transport, and to also provide policy insights both for countries and industry. Just okay, so this slide shows the female participation in the workforce by region. And we know that although the global average of women participation rate in transport was 17% in 2018, this percentage varies across regions. And none of the regions have a percentage higher than 25%, as shown on this diagram. And we know that in Europe, the percentage is about 22%. And so with Asia and Africa showing less than 10%, there are still a lot of areas that could be further improved. But at the same time, this could also reflect a lack of data in some of the countries that we have included in our study. And so this slide shows the average female participation rate by transport job division, which are also the 6 job divisions or 6 job divisions that we've included in our study. There's also a line that shows the total transport workforce. And we have seen that there are variation across the sector as well once we break it down by job division. And these job divisions were categorized by the International Labor Organization, where we actually got most of our data from for this specific project. And we know that through the data collected, civil engineering has the lowest female participation rate, whereas air transport and postal and courier services have the highest female participation rate. But of course, if we look closer into the type of jobs that are available or the type of jobs that are actually held by women, these are not equal across gender as well, where women tend to have lower paid positions compared to men. And so about our methodology, we have actually categorized different variables according to the literature review, so some of the groups that I've previously mentioned. And in addition, we've looked at labor laws, which include maternity leave and equal pay in our study. And we know that education and training, it's also very critical in retaining and hiring women. So associated variables have been included in this study, as you can see on the table on the right. And again, the 6 divisions that we have included our study were actually categorized by the ILO, the International Labor Organization. So we've included data from civil engineering, from land transport and transport via pipelines. And I know that previous speakers have mentioned rail, and so rail transport will actually fall under this specific category. And we've also included water transport, air transport, and 2 other categories. And we So with the data collected, we've conducted a regression analysis, which actually helped us better understand the correlation between women's participation rate in the 6 transport job divisions that I've shown in the previous slide, and also the variables that we've included in our study. And so these are some of our results. We've found that countries with higher shares of women in management positions in the transport sector also tend to have stronger female participation rate. And so before I forget, we've actually included data for 47 countries in our study. And so the results shown here are actually not specific to any country, but as a whole. And we've also found that economies that guarantee women an equivalent position after maternity leave, that have an equal pay law or a non-discrimination law, also have higher female participation in the sector on average. And looking at the our regression analysis results, we also found a significant positive relationship to GDP per capita and female participation in the labor force, which means that the higher the GDP per capita in a country, the greater the women's participation in the total transport sector will be. And of course, this is a reflection of the total percentage of female participation in the labor force in general, not specific to any sector. And education definitely plays a significant role. So gender parity in tertiary education and more women attaining STEM degrees do have a significant positive correlation with female participation in the sector, in the transport sector specifically. There are also limitations in our results based on the lack of gender segregated data. So the data that we've collected from ILO, for example, doesn't really show the different types of job categories or the different types of positions that are available or accessible to women. And so some of the key policy insights that we've concluded in our study include some of this following points. So we do need to increase and improve relevant education and training of women workers. And this actually implies starting from a relatively young age. And also we need to implement an integrated and collaborative approach to close gender gaps. And I'm very pleased to hear that the Diamond Project actually includes both the private sector, industries, and the research community. But I think it's also very important to bring in the public sector as well, governments and cities, to see how different stakeholders can work together and to collect different types of data in order for us to better understand women's needs and how to increase gender equality in the sector. And we also know that a lot of the data that we need do not pertain to just the transport sector. And so there is a need to work for the transport sector to work closely with the labor sector, for example, and also education, and to really design a collaborative approach to collect better data. And this is also relevant to the increase of stakeholder engagement going beyond the transport sector in order to design better policies and more inclusive and sustainable policies. And lastly, we found that it's not enough to just have an equal pay law that is not aligned with international standards. And so national policies would need to go a step further. In a lot of the countries that we have included in the study actually do have equal pay laws, but there are no strong enforcement in many of these policies. And so there has to be a better alignment of international standards with some of the existing national policies. And these are just some of our key highlights from our research study, and I'll be happy to discuss any questions or any other points later today. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that presentation. That's fabulous. And next we have a presentation from Isola and Stefan from our sister project Tingo.
Stefan, you can unmute yourself and show your camera and share your screen if you want.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello. Okay, I try also. Yeah, can you also see me?
Yeah.
Okay, hello everybody. And sorry, yeah, I had a little mishap in my program today. Today we have inaugurated in Romania a new railway line, and I was involved there. So I'm on the road. So I'm delivering the presentation through my phone. So I hope technically I will manage to up to up to the expectations. Um, it's also interesting before entering in my presentation. The first experience with this railway line as also from women, let's say, interaction with the transport. Um, the first users of this line were 90% women, which shows that it is easy to use, even if unfortunately part of the rolling stock is old, and I have witnessed some difficulties in getting in and out from the train. So it's still a lot to be done, and yeah, it's one of my let's call it hidden agenda with my collaboration with the Ministry of Transport to make more accessible also this kind of services. I'm also involved in Tingo, and I'm now representing this project, this sister project that is dedicated to promoting women in transport and transport activities, both as employment and as researchers and users. I'm now trying to share my presentation and to be as brief as possible. Just a second to find of. Uh-huh. Yeah. Of sorry, I don't know what's going on.
Stefan, don't worry. If you have any issue, we can come back to you and we can leave the floor to Lorna. If Lorna can take over in your presentation, and then you can resume your presentation after. Would that be okay?
Okay, and I'm trying to prepare the presentation to be.
That's very good.
Okay, sorry for this.
Lorna, sorry for the swift change of program. Is it okay for you to step in with your presentation?
Yes, that's absolutely fine. No problem at all. I'll just share my screen, hopefully. There we go. So good afternoon, everybody. I'm absolutely delighted to have been asked to come along and join this webinar today and talk a wee bit about some of the work that's been done with Women in Rail to identify and overcome some of the challenges experienced by women in rail. So I'm going to speak a wee bit about Women in Rail Scotland, which is the regional group which I'm part of, a survey which we undertook, and what that told us about the challenges of being women in rail, and how we are trying and hoping to work with industry to improve the gender balance. Women in Rail is an organisation created by Women in Rail for Women in Rail. And it was created really with the key focus of improving the diversity in the UK rail industry, providing networking opportunities and support for women within the sector, working with companies within the sector to try and encourage them to adopt diversity as a business strategy. Looking at how we can introduce initiatives to position rail as an attractive career choice for young people. I do quite a lot of work in schools and colleges and try and encourage young people, and particularly young women, to view the rail industry as a future career choice. And I have to say, it's not even on most of their agenda at all. So we have to work on that. The membership of Women in Rail includes people from a huge range of companies and roles across the whole of the UK rail industry. And as you can see, we have 9 regional groups throughout the UK. Women in Rail Scotland, which is the group that I'm a member of, was formed in 2017. Through my business, I'm a director of QTS Group, which is a large rail engineering company that works throughout the UK. I have to travel quite a bit throughout England, or I did pre-COVID days. Now I just sit at my screen. So I met quite a lot of women through England that were part of regional groups, and I went to some events, and I just was absolutely amazed by these amazing women and the great roles that they had in the rail industry that nobody knew about. So I was really disappointed to find out that there wasn't a group in Scotland, and decided to change that. So we now have Women in Rail Scotland, and we've had 2 very successful years already. And we now have over 250 members, again, from a really, really diverse range of companies and roles within those companies. So the objectives of Women in Rail Scotland really are the same objectives for the whole organisation, but to provide a forum to support all women working in rail in Scotland, to attract more women into rail. We really need to encourage young women to get into the industry so that we've got people to undertake these roles in the next generation. And one of the things that we're keen to do is to develop a Scottish Awards programme to showcase the talent and achievements that we have in the rail industry in Scotland. That's been slightly held back by COVID, but it's still on the agenda at the meetings. So for the last 2 years, we've had some great events, mostly this year online, but they've still been very good. And hopefully that's provided a really good platform to support our members. In 2019, we decided to run a survey for our members to try and establish what the key challenges faced by women in rail in Scotland were. So as I say, we ran the survey in 2019. There was 24 questions. It only took 10 minutes to complete. We left the survey open for 6 weeks so that people had time to respond, and we had 119 responses. So why did we feel that we had to run a survey? We wanted to make sure that we could identify and address the key challenges faced by women in rail, and we had to find out what those were. It's all very well us thinking we know what they are, but we wanted to be sure. And because the rail sector is growing significantly, and even with the challenges that COVID has brought recently, it's still increasing, and over the next 25 years is going to grow significantly. So we need to attract new talent and have a diverse resource pool to meet the growing demands of the industry. We want to shape the Women in Rail Scotland strategy so that we can make sure that our agenda is aligned with our members' needs. So we have to establish what those are. We want to be able to address and debate the issues raised by our members, and we want to be able to work with the rail sector in Scotland to try and resolve these issues. We also want to provide our members with the opportunity to raise key issues and challenges that are negatively impacting the gender balance in the rail sector. And make no mistake, there is a real issue with that, as our previous speakers have mentioned. And we want to make sure that our members have the chance to be part of the catalyst for change, and that we can inspire more women to join and succeed in the rail sector. And to do that, we have to be able to overcome some of these challenges. So what are the challenges? Wouldn't be any surprise to any of you working in the transport sector that long working hours, shift and weekend working, long travelling distances do not make these roles attractive to women, particularly women with families. And while there have been some improvements in benefits, such as flexible working and maternity and paternity support, there is still a lot of work needing to be done across the sector to improve these. There is a perception that there are limited options for women to progress to senior roles in the rail sector. Personally, I find that disappointing, and I think there are opportunities. I myself am a director of a rail company, and many women did seem to feel that there's a point they reach with no further opportunity, and also that this can be reinforced by a gender pay gap. If this is correct, we really need to do something about it. There's definitely a lack of awareness, particularly with young women, but throughout the female population, about the awareness of the wide range of diverse opportunities in the rail sector. So we need to be educating from an early age about that. And the one thing that always comes up in these surveys and on discussions and when we're talking to other women in rail on site, there is a great need for improved welfare facilities and better fitting PPE for women. You would think in this day and age these things would have happened, but there's still work to be done. So why do we want to work with industry to improve the gender balance? We want to inspire and support women to join and build fulfilling, successful careers in the rail sector and make sure that they are playing a key part in filling the skills and the talent gap that exists. We want to reduce the perception that the industry is male dominant and present the wide range of diverse opportunities to women. Only by doing this will we be able to create a truly diverse sector. We want to eradicate the myths associated with the sector. Historically, the industry has been just for boys, it's labour intensive, it's unrewarding. That's actually far from the truth, and I'm sure many of you on here today will agree with me that it's a very rewarding industry to be in, whether you're male or female. But by working collectively and getting the representation of women to where it needs to be, we can help women to reach their full potential and work with industry to create a diverse sector that includes a wide range of people, skill sets and perspectives. And that will help to contribute to the sector's skills shortage. But how are we going to do this? Easier said than done. It's essential that we encourage girls to study STEM projects. We need to boost the presence of successful women in the industry, and there are many of them. We have to inspire more female STEM teachers. We have to make sure there are strong women in the boardroom to look up to. And I noticed earlier one of the speakers mentioned that countries with women in management positions tend to have a stronger female participation. That's because there are women that young women can look up to and they can see what they can achieve. So we need to eradicate the myths associated with the sector, and we have to celebrate female success in the industry. We need to shout about its success, and that's one of the reasons that we are hoping to have a Scottish Awards programme as well as the UK-wide Women in Rail Awards programme. So women working in the sector must empower each other to follow their passion. We have to work together and we have to put ourselves in the limelight to showcase how rewarding a career in rail can be. We're not very good about shouting about our own success, and particularly in Scotland, but we have to start doing that. And we need to work with industry to take some practical steps and ensure that women in the rail sector are accommodated in supportive environment. Businesses need to have the requirements out on site for women. They need to adopt flexible working practices. If they don't do these things, they're not going to be able to access the talent and skills that they need. Forward-thinking businesses should be encouraged to implement schemes such as return to work schemes for women that have been off in maternity. Network Rail has an example. They have an absolutely brilliant returners programme, and that's proven to be a big success. So our goals are pretty simple: to reduce the increasing skills gap in the rail industry and to ensure that women can reach their full potential without barriers. And doing those two things will help to shape a dynamic, diverse and inclusive industry with opportunity for all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lorna. Really interesting. Thanks a lot. So we have a timetabled in for the moment a question and answer session. So if anyone has any questions, if they would like to type them in, or any comments to make, if they would just like to type them into the sidebar. Very well done, Lorna. And Chiara, we have questions. Do we have our silo questions? No.
We
Okay.
do. Sorry, guys. You need to go into Slido. I'll send you the link in the chat box. The link with the when you connect into Slido.com, there is a digit that you have to type into the message at the top, the message space at the top. In the chat, you'll see the digits 94173, and you should be able to see your first question and contribute to it. And I can share the screen with the question and the answer received.
That's excellent. Thank you very much for that. As we say, we want this to be an interactive event. So, you know, if you can please help us out and fill these questions in, and any questions for any of the speaker, just put into the sidebar there. And this is what you should find at your Slido. How would you define fairness in the context of fair employment for women in the transport sector? So what would fairness look like if you were to operationalise fairness in your organisation or in your environment? What would it look like on the shop floor, on the front line? Is everyone managing to connect to that okay? Any questions? Any difficulties accessing the Slido? Okay, our next speaker is Linda Allen from Irish Rail. And Linda is going to speak to us about opportunities and challenges of women employed in the transport sector.
Hi everyone. Sorry, just opening this up here. Slide. Can everybody see that presentation okay? No? Sorry, yeah, guys, 1 sec. Here I go. Brilliant.
Yeah, I can see it now.
Thanks a million. It's funny, isn't it? No matter how many times you do this, you always run into problems. I'm really delighted to be here, and I'd really like to thank Yvonne and Maria. It's been a pleasure meeting them, and you know, their passion for this work, and to be invited here to speak with you know, with such excellent professional females. It's really an honor. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the importance of female leadership development, and then the challenges and opportunities that we've seen within Éireann Rud Éireann. So just wanted to give a small background to the history of leadership development in Éireann Rud Éireann, but really to talk more about the Inspire programme that we ran for female leadership development, to talk a little bit about the research results that we received just recently around this programme and how it impacted female skill set and female leadership and female motivation, and then talk a little bit about the Evolve programme that we've put together. Evolving and emerging programme for during this digital period of time, and just what's going to happen in the future. Okay. So I suppose leadership development for women happened with an appointment of an equality manager in early 2000, and she really saw the need to address the low level of female leadership rates in the company. And we had 2 years of female-only leadership programme. I myself was part of it as a young clerical officer in the railway, and it was in partnership with Dublin City University. And then the learning and development model kind of moved to more mixed leadership programmes. And in 2007, we had a significant gap in funding. So what happened was, I suppose, those programmes and career development, you know, they stalled, and essentially we had an education scheme for people where we would reimburse them 50%. So I came into the role in 2018 and I was joined by a team of 2 other women just this year. And we began to look at female talent and how we might develop, well, talent within Iarn Rud Éireann for succession, but also how we would develop female talent. And what I started to see with our high potential programs when we ran adverts, that we'd very few female applicants, really low applicant rates. And when asked, you know, women didn't see these programs for them. So we became a member of the 30% Club in Ireland, which was to address this female imbalance, particularly on boards. And we wanted to look at ways of how we could really develop female talent and encourage people to apply for these high potential programs, which were really feeding into succession planning for the organisation. Under my remit also comes graduate programs and career development. And again, we've been really targeting female talent and female graduates as part of this. And I'll talk a little bit about that. So that's me in the bottom right or left hand corner on graduation day from Dublin City University, the very first female leader program. And you know, like that, I was a clerical officer from a disadvantaged background in Dublin, Ireland. And, you know, after completing this program, I went on to do many great things and move into this role. So it's a passion of mine. You know, it has helped me on the way, and it's helped grow my confidence and my sense of self-efficacy. So I would like to do the same and bring that same passion for other female talent. So part of our people strategy and a core objective of Iarn Rud Éireann is to sustain competitive advantage by developing our people and really drive innovation. And as we know from all the research, key ingredients in this are inclusion and diversity. So there's a huge emphasis in our people strategy. When I went into the role in 2018, when I met female clients, you know, I started to notice patterns with women and what women would say to me about career development. You know, they would need to know the job completely before they would go into it. They would need to nearly have all the skills before they would apply for the job. You know, sure, I wouldn't get that job, or there's no female at a particular level. And it was just interesting to hear the speaker there, you know, speak about women's perceptions. And I suppose we can't be what we can't see. We know that line. And when we don't see female role models, it's very difficult to aspire to those roles or see it as a reality. And this was something certainly that was colouring the perception of our female talent. So we needed to look at a programme that would, you know, develop women and female successors within Iarn Rud Éireann. So we looked at a bespoke programme for female talent to run parallel with our high potential programmes, because as I said, the number of females was so low in terms of applicant rates. And what I also noticed was that even, you know, when women would apply and they would do a test and didn't do so well, they would internally attribute the failure. Whereas I met many men, hope there's no men on the call here, you know, who would tell me that somebody disturbed them or somebody knocked on the office door or they didn't get much sleep the night before. I noticed there was a pattern in how the excuses, if you were to call it, or the reasons, you know, were being looked at, and women tended to internally attribute this failure, and then this was shaping their lens in terms of, you know, future promotion and how they might go. So I wanted to create a program that would take that kind of testing out of it, take that piece out of it completely, and look at how we could help women succeed at senior levels, and what were these critical subject areas that we needed to cover to see more female leaders in Iarn Rud Éireann. So this was really about the program, and it was called Inspire because it was about, you know, 20 women going on this program in the same way I suppose I had been inspired by other female leaders, and I wanted to be inspirational for them and where I had come, and then this 20 would inspire another 20 and another 20, and we would start to see a domino effect of female leaders in the organisation. So it was very much to to really support women. And I had great backing from our CEO, Jim Mead, who is so pro female talent and has really, you know, been a pioneer, I suppose, in the way he has hired female leaders through his career, where maybe it wasn't necessarily the norm. So this was the program. It was run in conjunction with Trinity College. It was a series of 6 master classes, 20 females, 2 actually who were on maternity leave. So that was new for us as well. And it was all underpinned by leadership coaching. So it was very much around, you know, increasing self-awareness, emotional intelligence, getting to know yourself, you know, developing a well-being plan for yourself and your confidence, what's your value, and, you know, what people say about you, I suppose, when you leave the room, and what are you known for, particularly in an organisation like Irish Rail, where, you know, you would have long service people. Your reputation is a huge piece of you when you apply for a role. And we looked at things like, how do you think and make decisions? Because it was a pattern, and particularly in a focus group research, where women were often nervous about making decisions, but yet they had some great ideas and could make super decisions. But it was a confidence piece and underpinning that. And then what's the story? Kind of using leadership skills to influence and engage others. And in fact, 3 of our female leaders, and I noticed actually one of the ladies on the call today, I hope she doesn't mind me calling her out, Anne Cowman, we had a strategy day there recently, and 3 of the women on the programme did testimonials about, you know, what the programme had done for them, and they used this kind of the storytelling and really showed, you know, how the programme had developed them and how it had increased their confidence in terms of future study and applying for future programs. And the power of that story and the power of that message from the CME, our Mechanical Engineering Strategy Day, and the exposure it gave those women, a number of opportunities, you know, have presented as a result of that. So that was our program in 2019, run with Trinity College, 20 women. And the 20 women were at all different levels within the organisation. So the research results that came post-programme, and there was qualitative and quantitative work done, research, kind of mixed methods. But what we found significantly, so participants would have completed questionnaires kind of pre-programme and post-programme, and then post each individual masterclass. And what we saw was there was a significant increase in self-esteem and self-confidence and emotional intelligence. So they were the 3 things that really came through for us. And then people started to, through applying for promotion, we started to see that there was motivation and ambition to lead a team. And also in the focus groups, you know, people reported that they now had the leadership skills they desired, and it would give them the confidence to go forward. Our programme for 2020 emerged, which was purely digital. So we had to go back out to procurement. This time I wanted to experiment and see what would it look like if we had 2 levels of leadership. Because some feedback from the first programme was that Irish Rail is still, you know, a hierarchical type organisation, and there's a cultural piece where maybe more junior colleagues would defer to more senior colleagues in terms of how they would speak, and we've noticed this across both female and male programmes. So I wanted to kind of experiment and see what it would be like if we looked at 2 levels of leadership. So those emerging at a frontline level and those emerging at a middle level. And maybe emphasising, you know, having similar topics, but emphasising different points relative to the career trajectory they were on, or the level of career they were at, and to really, you know, customise it. And what we began to see was that the personal development side of leadership seemed to be the key, you know, around the self-esteem, around the emotional resilience, and maybe masterclasses kind of with particular skills weren't seen as valued, that once people had this personal development piece, they could really take on anything and go off and study, you know, specific knowledge to their area. So we developed this program Emerge at 2 levels. And to really help, I suppose what's very important, I find, just, you know, in Irish Rail from my own experience, authenticity, and being able to be a leader that's authentic to women's own kind of personal strengths and values, as opposed to maybe emulating male leaders that are there. So we really wanted to bring this through in this program. And then perfectionism, it's something just from my work with coaching and from meeting people that women in particular have displayed this to me, need to be perfect before I'd move on, need to have all this learned before I could do this. I'd need to see that job in detail. And the perception, of having to be perfect and having to know it all before they would move is definitely a barrier. And how we manage self-promotion again and self-confidence and, managing career and family priorities. And Yvonne mentioned it, it is key for women. And what we have in line with this program this time around is a flexible working policy, which looks at different flexible working options for both male and female staff. To allow flexibility for everybody, because up to this kind of feedback from some women, they had a particular arrangement with a manager, but had they moved on, they may not get the same arrangement. So this often was a barrier to applying for promotion.
1 minute, Linda.
Oh, sorry. And reflection was such a key part. So that was the program there. And the one point I just wanted to make here was the systemic view of leadership. I suppose I was a little bit maybe naive in thinking we could run a program without looking at the system that people were working in. So we really tried to bring that into this program. So what does the future hold? Well, our new people strategy is been developed at the moment. And as part of this, the leadership team will hold responsibility for equality, diversity and inclusion across Iarnród Éireann. In fact, our CEO, Jim Mead, is actually on the steering committee and I'm a member as well. So it very much supports investment in female leadership programs for the future and female development. And there's going to be opportunities for emerging female leaders now in decision making, more lateral moves. So to give, I suppose, women that comfort that they look for, that they've asked for, to learn more and to really have this as part of the programs and to be able to move around. Also, Yvonne had mentioned it, attracting more senior female leaders ourselves in using more inclusive type advertising, gender decoders. Our language is quite masculine when we run it through. And what we found is with graduates and apprentices using female imagery where females are very much in the foreground or in an in-charge position has really attracted more female numbers. So that's really where we're focused. Yeah, so I think hope that's okay. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Linda. That was fabulous. I see we have a question in the side here asking, is there an industry-led sponsored leadership programme with Irish Rail?
Is there an industry? It's purely Irish Rail. So it's purely within Iarnród Éireann, and I've worked with Trinity College on the programme, and this year we've worked with COI Consulting on the programme. So it's open to everyone within Irish Rail, but I think it's a good idea to look at an industry type programme because we're probably all experiencing the same pieces. Yeah. I'd be open to that. Yeah. I see Shane there. Sorry, Shane is a great advocate of female talent. He's just popped up in the chat there. Yeah.
I see that there.
Yeah.
So next up, we have a presentation from Charlene Wallace, who is a director at Network Rail. Are you there, Charlene, and ready to?
Here. Yeah, I'm just trying to share my slides with you.
The technical god's been good to us today.
No, it's been good to me today at all, but I think I might have cracked it. Can you see that okay?
We can see it.
Perfect. I think, unfortunately, if I put my video on, you might not be able to. So I'll go with what I can do best, okay?
Thank you very much. We appreciate it. Thank you, Charlene.
No problem. Thanks, Yvonne, for inviting me along. As you say, I'm one of the senior leaders at Network Rail. My name's Charlie Wallace. I am National Passenger, Customer and now Freight Director, which is quite unusual in itself. But I'm really, really pleased to be here, and I'm very proud to say that today we are encouraging and supporting more women than ever to get involved in the railway as a career. Let me just see if I can change this. So a little bit of a history. tale from me today. Historically, women's work on the railway was very low paid, low status and linked to traditional housekeeping roles like cleaning, cooking, laundry, seamstress and attendance in ladies' waiting rooms. Now, we know these are all really, really important jobs, but it's not as nice to be limited to them. Women did look after the gates at level crossings, which was a great responsibility for safety of both railway workers and passengers, but this was only usually if their husbands or fathers were involved in other railway work. And women also weren't paid for this work because the gate came as part of the lodgings. We've come a long way since Elizabeth Holman had to pretend to be a man just to work in the railway back in the 1850s, but there's still so much more to do. It took 2 earth-shattering world wars to provide trailblazing women opportunities to work on this railway, and women were employed to do very restricted but very, they had to prove themselves to be adept at working in the same way as men could be. And opportunities after 1939, when the world came to a close, certainly were far greater. Women were able to work in operations and maintenance. They could operate signals, record train movements and inspect tunnels and bridges. But when the welcome reprieve of peacetime came around, the opportunities for women were scarcely there. Their hard work and effort wasn't rewarded and they couldn't really secure a bright future in the railway. It wasn't they were barred or anything like that, it was just that in practice, which you could say is a euphemism for culture, women weren't retained or recruited into operating and maintenance and engineering roles. However, we fast forwarded to the 1960s and 70s and the struggle for equal pay and sexual discrimination against, pay in the railway, we managed to secure people getting the same terms as men. But a number of high-profile women, such as Karen Harrison, who was the first woman train driver's assistant, who, funnily enough, was called a second man in the industry, also went on to become one of the first women train drivers. Karen herself described her railway career as 10 years of hell and 10 years of heaven. She said a bit more than that, but it was a bit rude, so I can only encourage you to look it up for yourself. I think it honestly sums up how hard it's been for her and other women in this industry. So that's the history lesson over for me just now. Where does that take us to today? Well, so let's look at the numbers. At the last count, within Network Rail, we've got 43,000 people working with us, and just under 19% of them are women. And in the operational focus parts of the business, that's the bits that actually run the railway, it's even less than that, it's like 10%, which is a shocking statistic. Thankfully, we live in a world today that recognises a strong and safe workforce as a diverse workforce. A culture of sameness can be very damaging. Matthew Syed said in his book Rebel Ideas, the power of diverse thinking, it's because we unconsciously enjoy being surrounded by people who think in the same way, who share our perspectives. It's comforting and validating. It makes us feel individually smart, even if we are becoming even more collectively stupid. This is probably summed up best by the classic quote by Walter Lippmann, when we all think alike, no one thinks very much. It doesn't help us to challenge the way we've been doing business for decades. It doesn't help us to drive productivity and offer better value for money. It doesn't help us to make a better railway or a safer railway, and it doesn't help us to put our passengers first. Diversity is often regarded as a political correct distraction, an issue of morality and social justice, but not of a performance and innovation. How crazy is that? It's only when we start to absorb the truths of diversity that our perspective starts to shift. We see that the success of humanity is less about the individual brain than the proprieties of the collective brain, and that shared brains desperately need diversity, which means we need more women. None more so than the rail industry, which includes some of the most challenging and complex projects in the world that millions of people depend on. If you ask a lot of women how they got into the railway, they'll probably say they came into it by accident or a roundabout way, and it wasn't a deliberate choice. I'm proud to say that I actually chose to come into this industry and hopefully to make a difference. We're changing that perception and working hard to engage more women to come to work with the rail industry. So following on from the first McKinsey Women Matter study, we carried out our own research at Network Rail and found that the teams with 20% or more women were more engaged. And we know that engagement drives business performance, engaged teams and more productivity, and they have more satisfied customers and have lower rates of absence and sickness. We found out that teams with more than 20% more women are more collaborative and more safer and more motivated. And when we looked at the teams with up to 40% women, the scores got even higher. 20% is a critical minimum threshold for positive gender impact, and the closer teams get to an even gender balance, the better they get. This became our 20 by 20 target, which was led by our diversity and inclusion team to increase our take-up of female employees across the business to 20% by 2020. And if you can recall the last count I mentioned earlier, that was just under 19%. We're a lot shy of the target, but not by much, and we want to go even further. Our strategic business plan for control period 6, which covers 2019 to 2024, sets out our plan to increase that number of women in our business by 50% by the end of the control period, and we have to have that gender balanced recruitment of apprentices and graduates matched. So we've also introduced flexible working policy, which has helped overcome a significant barrier for women in the workplace and inspire our employee network for gender equality, supporting women in Network Rail to fulfil their potential. We're also engaging with schools and colleges to encourage young people, girls and young women in particular, to choose science, technology, engineering and maths, we mentioned STEM again, as worthwhile subjects of school and higher education. And by doing this, we're inspiring future generations to get involved in the railway and engineering as a career in order to develop, maintain and operate our railways for decades to come. We're doing this by concentrating on attracting, recruitment, retention and progression. So how do we attract people? As mentioned, we're engaging with schools and colleges to encourage young people, girls and young women in particular, to choose science and technology, engineering and maths. We're working with an excellent programme run by Women in Science and Engineering, WISE, called People Like Me, where our women in technical roles go into schools and talk to girls about their work. We need to work together with employers, schools, parents and the government to stop limiting the potential of our young people. Are we doing everything we can to make ourselves an attractive employer for women? Well, we hope so. For starters, this photo we use for our recruitment, and indeed any of our public facing campaign now reflects a diverse mix of people we want to attract into our business and the customers we serve. This means there are more women wearing personal protection equipment and operational environments. And thankfully, these aren't staged photographs with models, but they are actual real people who work on our railway. We've also introduced gender neutral advertising to try and attract more female applicants, so they're not ruling themselves out of going for a job because the language used seems to be saying this is men's work. We feel that we have a female graduate ambassadors reaching out to young women still at university to tell them all about the variety of careers and that we can offer them. We've also rolled out our inclusive leadership training, which includes a focus on unconscious bias to make for a fairer hiring process, and we're providing support for our managers to help them understand the positive impact that difference can bring. We also talk about retention. So of course, once we've recruited the women, we want them to stay with us and to develop and progress and become the leaders of the future, to inspire other women to say, yes, I can do this too. There is not much point in hiring more women if we can't retain them. We need to understand how we can be better employers to women. In the battle for female talent, we need workplaces that are attractive to today's generation, where facilities are designed with women in mind as much as men, especially at depots and at trackside, with no one feels that they have to conform to fit in, where outdated sexist jokes are confined to bad of its time television that no longer get airtime for that very reason. Where working flexibly is embraced and encouraged wherever possible, not just for working mothers, but for working fathers too. Where gender equality is not just a women's issue, it's everyone's responsibility and it benefits all of us. The evidence for this is not emerging or strong, it's overwhelming. The last area is progression, which is all about how we help women at Network Rail progress onwards and upwards in the most senior roles in the business. It's not enough to retain our female workforce, we must also identify and nurture talent for the future where we see it. Women are underrepresented in the most senior roles. The more senior the position, the less likely it is to be filled by a woman. This means there is a lack of senior women role models in Network Rail and in the industry. And we need more men to mentor women and factor those relationships, the opportunity for reverse mentoring. This is where we inspire our Gender Equality Network group, and they're doing some amazing work in creating development programmes for women. Other programmes worth name checking against the same breath are obviously Women in Rail, who we've heard from earlier through Lorna, and who are making the industry more diverse with annual awards recognising some of the most fantastic contributions of all women and male allies. Women in Transport are also looking to do as much as they can. And then, of course, we have WISE. These platforms are making a big difference in changing the traditional perception of the railway as a man's world. It's about celebrating the railway as a great and rewarding place to work for women and to make them feel very welcome. So in closing, I'd like to quickly mention a few initiatives and events from the last year that I think illustrate the work we're doing for Women in Rail. For those here now and for those out there, the ones we need to reach out to. In November, we became accredited by White Ribbon UK, a leading charity that works to end violence against women. This accreditation means that we have made a commitment to encourage collective action of changing the behaviour and culture that leads to abuse or violence against women. It's also been a really busy year for mentoring opportunities. We've launched our executive leadership team reverse mentoring programme with many functions and regions rolling out local versions, and we partnered with Women in Rail, offering 50 colleagues across the industry our mentors. In June, we had an International Women in Engineering Day, where the theme was the inspirational Shape the World. And finally, in March of this year, thankfully, a little before lockdown to mark International Women's Day, Network Rail and South Eastern joined forces to launch the first ever passenger services run entirely by women on a banner day for the rail industry. I'll stop talking there and take any questions at the end. But thank you very much for having me, and I hope everybody enjoyed that presentation.
Thank you, Charlene. That was awesome. Thank you very much for that. So is there any questions for Charlene specifically? Or are there any questions that you would like to raise now for any of our speakers? We have slotted this time to be a question and answer session. Yep. Do we have our other poll question then, Chiara?
Yes, we do. So while we wait for other questions to, so there is a question from Wei on the chat saying, does the 20% threshold apply to other industry or just to rail? I think it's for Charlene.
I think the 20% that we're talking about is just for rail. So we're focusing on that, but I can certainly take that one away and double check it.
Well, while we do this, I want to share the fact that we got fantastic responses so far in this first question on the definition of fairness in the context of fair employment. I think I recognize some of the responders. Probably this is a fantastic first-hand experience from in the first response that we got here on, in short, inspire, engage, discuss, invite, as we have seen in the last two presentations. And we have other responses shorter, like giving equal opportunity irrespective of the background and challenges, and equality of pay and working condition, equal opportunity for advancement. And if you are ready on this very first short of questions, we have another pool coming on that actually ask you about the barriers, and it's done in the shape of a word cloud, where we like you guys to contribute any type of barriers you consider relevant in your own experience in the transport sector that you might have experienced yourself or you've seen in action. So if you can start rolling on, even on the equally well, even in this second set of questions, that would be very useful. And we show it in the next question and answer. There is also this.
No more questions coming on the side. Okay, so we'll go to our next speaker while everyone's answering those questions. Okay, so our next speaker up is Heather Waugh, and Heather is a train driver She's not just a train driver, she's a freight train driver. And award-winning train driver, I should say. Are you ready to share your screen?
Keep going, Yvonne. I think I could just leave you to this presentation.
No.
Just to warn you all, things are about to go downhill fast.
No, she definitely is an award-winning female train driver.
Right, let's see if we can share the screen. And is that showing up?
That's showing up, yep.
Fantastic. I genuinely don't think I need to say anything now, especially after Charlene there. That's me happy. I could just go and have my lunch now and leave you to it. But right, let's get started. So good afternoon, everybody. I'm quite honoured to be here. It's a privilege. I'm going to jump right in and show you a photo of what I do for a living. This is genuinely a photograph of me. I get to drive 10,000 brake horsepower, 1,600 tonne freight trains. I cannot tell you the sense of pride to be trusted to drive these incredible trains. It really is such a privilege. I've never loved what I do or where I work more than right now, but the travesty and the worry for me is that it so nearly didn't happen. Now, I'm not easily intimidated, but even for me, the thought of moving to freight just seemed a challenge too far. So my concern is how many women are missing out on jobs and careers that they'd potentially love. So today I want to talk about the potential barriers and influences that can hinder or encourage women both within and out with the industry. And I appreciate this has already been touched on by previous speakers, but the only way that I can do that is by sharing my own journey and my own experience. So I just want to cover why was it intimidating, what factors encouraged me to take the chance, the positives I've found, and the places that I think we need to improve upon. Now, I appreciate this is based on my experience of moving to the rail freight industry. Previously, I'd been a passenger train driver, but I think most of what I cover is relevant to any male-dominated workplace. So what was stopping me? Now, most people that know me would probably suggest I'm not the shy and retiring type. I've worked in male-dominated industries for 25 years. As I just mentioned, I'd been a passenger direct driver already for 13 years. So why would somebody like me feel hesitant about moving to freight? Well, let's look at some of the facts. Now, I appreciate Charlene's covered some of the industry facts, but in freight, women make up less than 3% of freight train drivers, 3%. And at the time that I was thinking of making the move, there were actually no female freight drivers in Scotland at all. There still isn't. I'm the only one. The company that I was looking to move to had never had a female train driver in Scotland, ever. Now, take a minute and try and imagine the doubts and fears that go through your mind knowing that you'd be the first female ever at a depot. I mean, this is 2020, you don't expect that anymore. What kind of perceptions would you have? Because here was some of mine. I was worried about there perhaps being a hostile environment. Would I be accepted? Am I going to get comments or attitudes of she shouldn't be here? Will it be confrontational? Will I cramp their style? Do I really want to be that person that goes in and makes other people change? Is it going to be dirty? You know, the perceptions of freight. Will there be female toilets if there are no females? Will there be female uniform? Will it be too physical? Will it be too hard? Is it all night shifts? And all these things lead you to start doubting yourself and come up with the ultimate question of, can I even do this? Or more importantly, do I want to do this? And the honest answer was no, I didn't. It just felt like there were too many barriers and too many challenges. Did I really want to have to prove myself again? Did I want to work in that environment and in those conditions? The simple answer was no, I didn't. So what changed my mind? What gave me the strength to make that leap? Well, during my research into, obviously, women in rail freight, one image kept appearing at this time, bearing in mind this was mid-2018. This is Debbie Francis, the female managing director of a rail freight company. Now, prior to this moment, I would have told you that frontline staff like myself have very little interest in senior management personnel. I had never realised the impact and the influence that seeing a woman in the boardroom would have on someone at my level. I'd never realised this before because, let's face it, it's pretty damn rare. But why is it important? Why was it not more important for me to see other female train drivers in my research? Now, of course, that would have been nice, but ultimately, it's the boardroom who create policy and change culture. It's the boardroom who will dictate whether I work in an environment where I feel valued and understood. And that brings me to another factor about this photo that influenced me. This managing director is climbing into a local in her PPE. She's willing to get out of the boardroom and gain insight into the so-called front line. Again, I would have never considered that this would be a factor to me, but it had a huge influence. Similarly, the same company, this is the HR director, Natasha Hansen. Again, not just a woman in the boardroom, but a woman photographed here on the front line. I believe Natasha used to insist on doing a full shift at every depot to gain insight and understanding into the work involved and the people. As she says in her quote here, you have to listen to the people you work with. They are your experts. The point I'm making is that not only does seeing women in the boardroom have a massive impact at my level, but seeing women who are willing to truly learn about the realities of working on the front line and ultimately drive through the change needed is what gives strength and confidence to people like me. And I have to add that Natasha Hansen has since become probably my biggest influence with regards to diversity and equality. The passion and the vision that she has is incredibly inspiring. And I probably wouldn't be doing this today if it wasn't for the support and encouragement of Natasha. So I really do recommend people that look her up on Google or LinkedIn, along with the likes of Debbie Francis, for more kind of inspiration on diversity. But these were the factors that gave me the strength to take a chance and move to freight. And in that journey to making my decision, I realised, probably for the first time, the importance of women being willing to stand out and be visible. It isn't enough for women to simply do their job. For the sake of other women, we really do need to be visible. So having made the decision to move to freight, what has my reality been? So let's start with the positives, because genuinely there are a lot. I have never enjoyed my work more than I do right now. I've never settled into a place of work quicker or easier at any other time in my career. My depot is immaculate, it's professional, and I have all the facilities I need. My colleagues, all men, have been welcoming, supportive and encouraging, and they've made me feel part of the team from day one. In fact, they've just elected me as their union rep. None of that suggests she doesn't belong here. My company have made me feel that my views as a woman are valued, and we have an HR director who genuinely welcomes feedback from all levels of the company. And the rail and the freight industry as a whole have encouraged me to be more visible. I mentioned Natasha, I mentioned Debbie, but there are so many women and men who have supported me in this journey, which leads me to a very welcome conclusion, and that is, we are winning the battle against conscious discrimination. I know that there is still work to be done, but my experience has been incredibly positive. In the most male-dominated industry, I have not been subjected to any of the sexist comments or attitudes that I've been concerned about, but it is important that I highlight where work is needed. And for me, that's with regards to unconscious discrimination. Now, what do we mean when we say unconscious discrimination or bias? Put simply, the world has been created by men for men. Now, I don't say that with any bitterness or even accusation. It is simply a fact that our physical and emotional environment was created with the assumption that it would be men undertaking these roles. Now, this is the case in many aspects of life, and as long as women continue to adapt and conform, then these unconscious discriminations will continue to go unnoticed. Women must highlight whether there are issues. None of us want to stand out, but we are different physically and emotionally, and our male allies will never see these issues unless we explain it. I've been made to feel very welcome and accepted in so many ways, and I'm incredibly grateful for that. But just to give you an example of unconscious discrimination, nothing tells a woman that she doesn't belong more than things like male-only toilets. Yes, there still exists mess rooms in the UK with no female toilets. Male-only uniforms. Again, a number of companies still do not have female-specific uniforms. Locos and cabs that were designed based on an average height of 5'9", i.e. the average height of a man. The average height of a woman is 5'3". The result is that steps are too high and controls are just that bit out of reach, just creating this general feeling, again, that you don't belong there. And not enough female voices in the boardroom. Charlene's already mentioned it, so has Lorna, but for change to truly happen, there needs to be proper representation in the policy shaping positions. Now I'm going to start my summary, Yvonne will be happy to know, with another Natasha Hansen quote, though she may not thank me for this one, but it is genuinely the one statement that I want us all to leave here with today, and it's quite a simple but deep statement. It's 2020 FFS. Now, just to translate for anyone who needs it, this means, for goodness sake, it is almost 2021. Why are we still having these conversations? It is almost 2021. It is time to stop talking and start doing. I've seen a number of diversity charters and I welcome them all, but it's time to create some black and white actions. I'd like to see every company commit to a minimum standard across the industry, with things as simple as female toilets in every mess room, female uniforms that retain the same practicalities as the male ones, every new cab, train and working environment to be assessed on the needs of both men and women individually. 50% of potential candidates for boardroom positions should be women. No one wants positive discrimination. The right person should always get the job. But if women make up more than 50% of the population, then why are there so few in decision-making positions? Debbie Francis and Natasha Hansen created a policy at DRS that provided a level playing field for women, whilst it still ensured the best person always got the position, male or female. I think Charlene's already covered some of that as well from the Network Rail point of view. Let's commit to this at every single company. And educate. We've made such fantastic progress in the war against intentional discrimination, but we must now take that forward and start educating men and women on what unconscious discrimination is. We often hear that it's always these damn women who complain about things, whereas the men just get on with it. It's time to realise that the vast majority of jobs were created with men in mind, and that in 2021, women shouldn't still need to continually adapt or conform to make something work. If people don't understand the problem, it will never be fixed. In summary, I'd love to see us get the Charlene's, the Debbie Francises, the Natasha Hansens, Lorna Gibsons, our industry and diversity leaders together and propose a proper list of commitments with a view to creating minimum standards across the transport industry. In a sentence, it really is time to stop talking and start acting, and it really is time for me to stop talking. Thanks very much for your time.
Thank you, Heather, for that wonderful presentation. Absolutely excellent. Is there any specific questions coming up for Heather? No. Nothing there, so well, we'll give that a few minutes, let that run. If there's anything else you would like to ask, I can't even get through here because Brilliant presentation. Brilliant, brilliant. How cool are you? Okay, so our next speaker is Inga-Lena Hinch from the European Transport Workers Federation, and she's going to discuss some of the findings from their survey. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Inga-Lena Hinch, and I work for the European Transport Workers Federation, and I will try to share my screen with you. I hope it does work.
It was working a moment ago.
Yeah,
Now I
it should
can see.
be visible now. So, yes, my presentation is about our latest campaign, which we just launched end of October. It's called Yes, More Women in Transport. And I must say, after the previous presentation, it's a bit difficult to kind of be the next speaker, but I think there are quite a lot of elements which, so to say, were mentioned before and which are reflected in our campaign. And I will not go into the details of why the sector is so male-dominated. We had this presentation, but rather this is really focused on what, so to say, unions together with companies or the social partners can do, and also where the support is needed from policymakers. So a few words about the ETF. We are a pan-European trade union organization. We represent over 5 million transport workers from all transport sectors in 41 European countries. We are a recognized social partner in 8 social dialogue committees at European level. And our mission is to represent the social and economic interests of our members at European level, which are the transport workers, and to achieve fair working conditions and quality jobs for all transport workers. As the sector is so male-dominated, we do have an elected women's committee, which is one of our policy-making bodies in the ETF. And also we do have a female general secretary, and one of our vice presidents is female. So we've been trying to kind of, gender mainstream also our bodies. However, and this is, I think, something where we can still improve. I heard this at another, panel discussion, this issue of panels, which are panels only, so to say, attended by men. And this is something which I would like in in ETF also, that ETF does not attend any panels which are only attended by men. So now our campaign and how this all started. This topic of attractiveness has been discussed for many years. ETF is also one of the founding members of the European Commission platform Women in Transport. And our, so to say, kind of problem with this term attractiveness is, or has been, it was never really, what does it mean? What would make transport really more attractive for women to work in? And that's why last autumn we launched a survey. It was carried out between the 7th of October and the 29th of November. And the aim was to investigate the working conditions for women transport workers, and also what are the changes needed to make the transport sector more attractive and fair and fit for women to work in. During these 6-7 weeks, we received 2,776 valid responses. And we had responses from transport workers from all sectors from across Europe. The highest number of responses came from the railway sector, followed by civil aviation and road transport. We were quite lucky that we could work together with 2 well-known researchers who have been working on the topic of gender equality for the European Commission, the ILO, and other bodies. And they worked with us on the one hand on designing the survey, but also analyzing the survey and also drafting the survey report. So what were the main barriers encountered by women transport workers as identified in the survey? To no great surprise, the first one was a very dominant masculine culture and stereotyping of women. Quite a few respondents actually called it a toxic masculine culture. The second barrier identified was discrimination and unequal treatment at work. Third one was lack of work-life balance and the so-called care trap. Then, as it was mentioned just before, the issue of women's health and safety and lack of acceptable sanitary facilities. And last one, high levels of violence and harassment at the workplace. These are some of the figures to show a bit more what the respondents, so to say, responded to, and also what were the main issues identified. For example, 1 in 2 said they do not feel that their job provides them with good opportunities for promotion and development. 23% identified sanitary issues as one of the main problems in the workplace. 1 in 3 women replied saying that the work environment fails to support them in doing their job well. And then the issue of health and violence and harassment was emphasized by many, and also the topic of unequal pay and gender imbalance was stressed by many. So what were the conclusions we draw from this? First of all, women actually face quite two competing realities when working in the sector. On the one hand, many of the jobs offered in the various transport sectors offer interesting long-term employment, and this was highlighted by many of the women. But on the other hand, it was stressed that the workplace and working conditions fail to meet the women-specific needs. And that's why really the main conclusion of our survey is that there's an urgent need for substantial changes to make the sector really attractive and fit for women to work in. And the main factors, as I said, are the male culture, to provide or to eliminate or end the male culture, to provide safe workplaces where women are not exposed to violence and harassment, to have full access to proper sanitary facilities, and also to improve work-life balance. And this is one of the testimonials. Our survey was designed in a way that women had, on the one hand, the possibility to, so to say, answer multiple choice questions, but we also had some open answers where the women could share their stories and experiences with us. And this was really one of the very kind of testimonials which in the end says it all. What is needed? A clean driving cap, time between trains to go to the loo, flexible working hours, more than 6 weeks of maternity pay. If you're sick, you get 16 weeks. A privacy policy where your personal file isn't openly discussed with your colleagues. A zero tolerance policy towards bullying and harassment. And lastly, a less toxic work culture. And based on these conclusions, our initial plan was to immediately in spring go into, so to say, the launch of our campaign. And then the COVID-19 crisis hit us. And what we immediately noticed, and this was then also later on confirmed by IG, ILO, and other international bodies, that the COVID-19 pandemic hit women transport very hard. And there is a risk to add to the existing inequalities. While women played really like a vital role as key workers, they were completely overlooked in the responses to the crisis. And also we the issue of domestic violence was brought to our attention, and also the issue of, in particular, those sectors where women transport workers are in direct contact with customers or passengers, the issue of aggression. Not so much now anymore, but during the summer, women transport workers and also their male colleagues were often, so to say, made to enforce the wearing of masks, and this created a lot of aggression, frustration from passengers. And what we noticed in this survey, but also in a previous survey, which was purely focused on the topic of violence against women, is that both men and women transport workers are confronted with aggression, but that the aggression against women transport workers is much more sexual and also often much more physical. And that's why our plea was really that all relevant actors at national but also at European level need to join forces and to establish a gender equal new normal that guarantees good jobs for all workers. And the key demands, part of our campaign, are to mainstream a gender-responsive approach into transport policy at national level, but also at European level, strengthening social dialogue, and also integrating, so to say, a gender-responsive approach into collective bargaining, and also closing the so-called data gap. Often on, so to say, gender-related topics, there's very few data available. For example, we do know that there is a gender pay gap in the transport sector, but there is no data available at national level or at European level to really, to have more, or to have a more concrete idea what it means, and also then to develop policies against it. Thirdly, promoting work-life balance, equal treatment and pay. Fourthly, ensuring a gender-balanced approach to health and safety. And lastly, to end violence and harassment against women transport workers. We launched our campaign end of October, and then actually we had quite a number of action days until just very recently. Firstly, there was a debate on women in transport in the Transport Committee of the European Parliament. And together with a Dutch MEP called Vera Tax, we issued a statement calling on the European Commission to mainstream a gender-responsive approach into the new transport policy strategy, which was, I think last week presented by the European Commission. And indeed, they do include, or they did include, equality mainstreaming. They also quoted our findings and the main barriers. However, this new strategy lacks when it comes to really concrete actions. The next action day we had was on the 10th of November, the Equal Pay Day. And here we joined the international trade union movement, or in particular the European trade union movement, to call for a pay transparency directive and to close the gender pay gap. This directive has been pending now for a long time, and this is really an important step to come to better.
1 minute, Inga.
I'm almost finished. Then on the 19th of November, we have the World Toilet Day. This is a day which I think is not so known at European level yet, but for us it's a super important day because this is the best opportunity to call for decent sanitary facilities and access for women to toilets. Then on the 25th of November, the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women, we actually launched a new workplace policy guidance on how to address the issue of violence at workplace level. This is a tool for social partners at company level on on addressing the issue at workplace level, and it also takes full account of the new ILO Convention on Violence and Harassment. And last week, on the 10th of December, which was the International Human Rights Day, we actually published 5 video interviews with Dr. Jane Pillinger, who's the author of this guidance, on how to use this guidance, what it is for, and also why domestic violence is a workplace issue. Our campaign page is it's on the ETF website. We are on social media, and thank you very much. This, in a nutshell, was a short presentation of our campaign, and these are pictures of our members who were not in the home office and who, so to say, kept things running during the crisis. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Inga. Really interesting. Francisco, I see you have a question. Do you want to type it into the side panel, please?
Okay, Yvonne, I don't know, so I cannot raise the question in
okay.
voice, no, or not?
Yeah, okay, go.
Okay, Yvonne, thanks very much. Because my name is Francisco from ITEC. I am working in the Diamond project, and I was studying this report that has been presented during my work in Diamond. And one of my interpretation that I was afraid about this potential interpretation, and I wanted to comment this with the presenter, because I saw that the key demands that have been presented were based on a minority of respondents, due that most of respondents show with a good satisfaction about their employment situation. So could be this a potential interpretation of this study, or what I am not doing well with this interpretation, because the higher percentage about the questions are satisfied about the situation. Only the percentage unsatisfied are 25%, 15%, 80%, minorities. So can you clarify this perhaps bad interpretation of this study? Thanks, Yvonne. Sorry.
Inga, would you like to answer that directly?
Yeah, thank you. As I said, I mean, the women who responded to our survey, they find themselves in a kind of conflicting reality. On the one hand, they do, so to say, have jobs which are stable, which are to a certain extent, so to say, satisfying. But if 1 in 2 women say that their job does not provide them with good opportunities for promotion and development, and if 1 in 3 say the working environment fails to support them doing their job well, I mean, this is something we cannot ignore. And I find it a bit, I would not say insulting to the women who responded to our survey, but to say that 1 in 4 saying they identify sanitary issues as a major problem, is this really a minority? And then we should just say the sector is perfect?
This was my interpretation, yes, that there was nothing to do because the majority is satisfied. But yes, you have clarified my question, because we must consider in a very high position the voice of the minorities. Yes, you are right.
Yeah, but it's also came through in all the presentations today, Francisco, as well. So that would be something that we would have to look at from across the board. So I have to move things along now.
May I say 2 more things? Also,
certainly, Inga.
1 in 2 women said that their workplace does not prioritize safe and adequate work environment. And this is actually something which, so to say, confirms a previous survey of which we did a couple of years ago, where a large percentage of the women said violence is part of the job. And not to take these numbers serious and to develop a campaign to make the sector more attractive, and to make this an issue for social partners at company level, but also for policymakers, I mean, then as a trade union, we would not, so to say, do our job well and take what our members say serious.
Thank you, Inga. Thank you for coming back on that one. Okay, so yeah, now is the turn of the Diamond Project. And I'm going to ask Chiara to share her slides. Has everyone been going to the Slido and answering the questions? As I say, we're really looking for this.
So before we share our slides, actually, this is the last word cloud that we collected about the experience of facilitators for the workplace, and we really want to thank you for whoever was able to contribute. As you can see, the more visible are the most voted elements, but and we could see in the presentation of today the effects of the role model, or if you like, the personal experience had on everyone in terms of organizing some of the responses. So while this is ongoing and more people are joining, we are actually going to start presenting some elements of work as it was actually said by Heather. It's time for action. We are in the next phase of the project where we are starting some action as well. So we like to share with you some elements of what we'd like to do in terms of this action. So the first thing is actually most of you that participated into this will have a follow-up email where we invite you to contribute towards a white paper on fairness and inclusiveness for women in transport, surface transport especially, that we have to start writing up and presenting in the next less than 6 months actually, about the Diamond Project. And in this program that we are shaping at the moment is this idea of having a fairness maturity model being developed and shared across organizations. So there is something like this in the sense of organizations sharing different metrics and their experience for women in transport. This model is meant to be not just for the transport employment side, but also for the transport user side. And that's why it's more generic in scope. However, it's built about those 3 key areas of capacity to meet required needs, and it's either the needs of the employees or the needs of the user of the service, accessibility in terms of accessibility of services as well as fares and cost, and safety and security. These are all aspects that came loud and clear and strong in our data collection, and as you could see also in the data collection and personal experience that was shared with us today. In terms of how to assess this fairness, we have a triangulation of 3 areas. So an element of observable variables or metrics. They are facts, if you like. Then there is an element of user perception and satisfaction. And then there will be an element of self-audit for management to comply with. The idea of a fairness and inclusiveness maturity model is basically a declining, and well, it's actually an idea that stems from the quality management process, where a quality maturity model is often applied to many processes in organization, or safety as well. So we actually decided to appropriately compare those criteria to the inclusiveness metrics, and therefore we came up with these 4 potential maturity levels, from emerging to managing, inclusive, and to continuous improvement. And it's basically to assess a capacity of an organization to improve hiring and retaining a diverse workforce, standing on not just hiring and retaining, but also in the service provision, as we said, but standing on the elements of concrete elements that some of us already mentioned in the previous presentation. So some of the examples are, for instance, managing and caring responsibility for family and elderly. What is the possibility of accommodating those needs within the workplace from the perspective of the worker? So the category of classification of what is meant to be fair came from previous studies that we've used for the surveys, and we used for the thematic analysis, not just of the literature, but also of the interviews that we ourselves carried out. And that's how Yvonne, myself, Mary, and many others have met some of the people that were able to present today. And this idea of triangulation for the identification of areas of improvement, and maybe also the element of suggestion of what are good practices that could be shared across organizations. And is it possible, therefore, to compare notes depending on the level of maturity that different organizations might show capacity for? So again, it's a triangulation that requires having a same scale of comparable metrics across those three elements of observation, self-evaluation, and user satisfaction. And this is an example of a table that we can share with all of you, a table that we define, this is just an extract of that table, where we define what are poor, medium, or good criteria of self-evaluation when asked about, for instance, recruitment policies, or policy related to gender awareness and anti-bullying, or promotion and training, or security and safety, for instance, that will help us benchmark or compare across different experiences, we hope. In the last contribution that we to share with you on how we like to potentially assess different organizations on a scale of maturity, like based on these three elements, and what you think of it. As usual, we like to use a Slido for this purpose. So again, we'll ask you this time to join a different Slido, a different page, where, if possible, we will enjoy you commenting on the following. So I'll show you the questions that we have, because I think it would be useful for everyone. In terms of the action that we want to try and carry out, would it be possible to activate? So the questions that we ask is, what do you think about having a maturity model that will effectively encourage organizations to measure themselves on these metrics and measure themselves on the capacity that they have to deliver on those metrics? So if you can, we're just about to activate this new and present it to you. Or if you have any comments, activate your microphone, or if you can use the chat in whatever means or shape you're capable of. We'd be very interested in getting your experience feedback on this aspect. Yvonne, if you join me.
Yeah, I'm just putting out a message on here. So we've sent out emails to, I think it was just the participants, but we have the maturity table and the feedback forms available that we will be emailing to everyone who's been a participant today. But I mean, if you could take the time today to have a look and let us know, what do you think of the process of the maturity table? You know, is this something you could see working within your organisation? What about the contents of the maturity model? Would that suit your organisation, or is there other aspects, concepts that should be considered? So if there's any questions at all, we're here to answer those for the next few minutes. Anyone?
Also, I must say that Stefan got back to me because we are, as you noticed, we are running late. We weren't able to show the presentation that was prepared by Tingo. So what I will do is sharing on the chat now what Stefan has shared with us, because it was unfortunate that the connection through the phone wasn't working as well. And we are we're collecting this feedback on behalf of both projects, so that we could use the remaining year that we have, or less than a year, to move towards the right set of actions. That's why it's very important that we can get some direct feedback for results.
Before our speakers start dropping out, can I ask you all just to put your cameras on for a second, that we can try and catch some photographs?
Yes.
Yeah, please.
All of you. Inga, also yourself, before you move on.
Before you all disappear.
Yes.
Who's at the top? Inga. Inga's very blurry. And yeah, I think that's everyone. Thank you very much for your time.
Yeah. I'll come back to you separately with feedback. I just haven't had enough time, Yvonne, to look at it. But I like the metrics and I like the behavioural anchors because that's kind of how we're used to working. So I just wanted to digest it. And I suppose I had a question in my own mind. Some of it is self-assessment. So if I was to answer it, I might answer differently to someone else. So I was just wondering, have you different people in mind to evaluate the behaviours? So whether it's like an employee or a HR person or what, were you looking at a survey? I'm thinking of our employee opinion survey, but is there a set of questions maybe could go against the behaviours that we could use? That's probably, yeah.
Yeah, so that's exactly the point, Linda. So we tried and align the metrics that we have in the self-evaluation. The self-evaluation is directed towards an HR manager, actually. That's the type of profile that should address those questions. Or it could be a company director. However, they follow the same categories of questions that are then asked to the employees. And then there should be the metrics associated to those questions that could be compared against in the observation piece. So there are sort of anchor data to have proof against some of the things that you might self-assess in one direction or another. And that's why it's useful to have the triangulation, not just to come up with a single index at the end of the process, but to realize also that you might have certain ideas about how fair your entire situation can be in an organization from a management perspective, and then maybe sometimes the cold shower or the agreement from the employee side about what the perception is, and then the metrics and how the metrics might correspond or not to what you think is a good practice. And that's the usefulness of not just a single index at the end of the process, but just having clarity about where is this data, those three elements of the assessment coming from, and how they are in accordance or disaccordance with each other. Because the maturity is actually a matter of consistency. So the more you are in agreement across those, and the more and the better the metrics are, obviously. So if you have the metrics below 3 in a scale from 1 to 7, you're probably not very mature. But if you are in a good agreement and those metrics say that you're above 4 in 50% of the category or 60% of the category with a certain level of consistency, that is a good point about saying you do what you say you do, and your employees agree with you.
Thanks, Maria. And I was just interested because even though we talk about the railway, and I think it was Wei Shun that said about the 6 different categories of, it'd be interesting culturally to see the maturity model in each kind of business area or each different category, or even the differences between more mature females and younger females, you know, their perceptions. I'd love to kind of, you know, start to slice and dice it a bit. So yeah, it's I'm definitely open to trying it. So if you're like to pilot it, I'd love to do something. Yeah.
Thank you, Linda.
Thank you, Linda. That would be very useful to have you as a pilot tester.
Lorna, do you have any feedback? Anything you think on that table? Sorry to put you on the spot there.
No, I think the maturity table is really good. I had a look at it before we came on, and even just thinking about it from my own business rather than Women in Rail or whatever.
Yeah.
It really made me think about things that maybe we think we're good at and we're doing well, and then thinking, well, actually, you know, maybe we're okay, but we could probably be doing that a lot better. So I think it would be very good for just giving people a thought process that they're maybe not having at the moment, particularly maybe non-females. Because we probably do think about these things, and through this sort of event and Women in Rail and other organisations, we are thinking that way. But a lot of people are just getting on with running their businesses and not really thinking, and that's not a bad thing, that's just not high on their agenda sometimes. So it would be something that would maybe focus them a bit.
Thank you.
Are you going to share the kind of results of the poll and any sort of questions that came up?
Yes, we are. We will be doing that. So hopefully we've got lots of people answering all those questions. And yes, we will send all that out to you in the next couple of weeks. And let you see what's what. And hopefully, you know, everyone will return their feedback forms to us. And that gives us then that industry insight to exactly what we're doing. And hopefully between us all, we can get something going that we can actually get out there.
That's the important thing, isn't it?
Yes.
I put that in my comment, just probably a bit too previous, but you know, there's a lot of these things and people are talking about what needs to happen, and maybe we're touching on it and addressing it to a point, but I feel there needs to be more done to push that forward. Completely.
And I think the speakers today, the variety of speakers and from across different countries and how similar the findings have been. And I think that confirms in our mind as a project that our maturity table is looking, it's going in the right direction.
Yeah, definitely.
We have the right things there. So as you say, let's stop talking and let's get something developed that we can put into the workplace.
Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah.
Well done. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming, for all the speakers and everyone engaging. Thank you.
I don't know if Heather is still with us. Heather, we'd like to see you, if you can turn your camera again on. But the reason why we are focusing on some metrics is not because we like metrics per se, but we're aware of the principle that what gets measured gets done. So we're trying to give some ideas about things that you can assess to shape culture around those, if possible. Now, the culture is much more influenced by inspiring figures like yourself and actually seeing things in action. That's how we operate as human beings. However, the support of having the right policy in place, the right facilities in place, and having metrics that actually testify to them is never to be underestimated.
Correct.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you for your input. So can we officially close this webinar and say that if anyone would like to be in touch with anyone else, or you're looking for anyone's details, please contact us. We'll pass that on. We really appreciate you all turning up today and listening to us and for taking part.
Thank you for having us.
And thank you to Marina in Barcelona for all her background work and putting this together. She's been a superstar. She really has. Thank you.